Loan officers, it's halftime 2026, and guess what? You may or may not be on track. Michael Regan, the coach at Building Champions, is going to talk about the K economy, how it applies to loan officers. That's to you. How some of you are crushing it, having your best years ever, and others of you are not. You're down there struggling. And so this is your opportunity to learn Michael's framework, which includes pruning, like how to figure out what are the things you got to get rid of, what are the things that you got to pour more little love into, and where you should be focusing your time. The bottom line is this. He says it's probably not your strategy, it's your execution. This is the roadmap to get there. Join me and my friend Michael Regan, along with Deborah Byrd and Dave Savage, on this edition of the Loan Officer Mastermind. Welcome, everyone, to the Loan Officer Mastermind. I am Todd Bookspan, the founder of Win by Noon, and I am so excited for our guest today. But before I bring in Michael Regan, of course, I've got to bring in my co-host. Good morning, Deborah Byrd, founder of Plug and Play SM.
Hello, good morning, and happy Juneteenth for those of you who are listening live on Friday, June 19th, and happy early Father's Day. I believe all of you are fathers, correct?
That's well played.
Okay, well, and Dave, looks like he just joined us hot.
I did about this. I'm super excited about Father's Day. As a dad, it's one of the few days where everything I want to do, we do as a family. So let's go. I'm also really excited to have Michael Regan as we enter halftime for 2026. It's right at halftime, and it's a perfect time for Michael.
Yeah, I would agree. So I love a couple of things. My Father's Day is actually be on Saturday because it's going to be a special Father's Day because it's going to be with my son-in-law Kyle, who's a father for the first time. It's my first Father's Day as a grandfather. But Sunday is Giselle's birthday, and so Sunday we want to make all about her. It's her day, and I'm willing to move my day to Saturday. But there's lots of things about Michael Regan, who's our guest, that make me super excited. The biggest thing is when I look back over my career in mortgage, Michael's one of the people that early on I spent time masterminding with intentionally week in and week out, and a lot week in and week out. And ultimately we would be intentional around building and planning together. And so he's one of the people that I've spent a lot of time with over the years. And then along the way, Michael became a coach with Building Champions. I was a client for more than a decade of Building Champions, and then ended up being a coach alongside of Michael. So it's always exciting to have someone on who I have so much respect for, who I consider a friend, and I think is going to share a lot with us about halftime. And so the other thing I'll say about Michael, and you can correct me, Michael, if I'm wrong about it, but I would say your coaching practice is around not just loan officers, but a lot of leaders. You coach people who lead other people in the loan organization. So I think as we do this halftime conversation about some opportunities that you see and that people can make change, it's coming not just from the seat of a loan officer, but also from the view of the leaders who are coaching those loan officers. So welcome, Michael.
Wow. Yes, and probably yes. I'll get to all of those, or hopefully get to some of those. Deborah, this is crazy, isn't it? We've got all kinds of topics to cover already.
We need to get together in person in Lake Oswego. Let's do it.
I will look forward to that on the one day I'm in Lake Oswego, Wednesday. Let's make it happen.
Okay, Wednesday.
So here's the funny thing for your audience, Todd, and for those of you who maybe haven't heard these stories before, Todd's right. When 20 years ago we were meeting, it really was every Friday, I believe. So before there was a Win by Noon mastermind on Friday, we were the original guys doing this at a place called the Fork or the Spoon somewhere in Scottsdale.
That was those were great days.
Those were definitely great days. And also, I guess, just so I can have a little fun with this, Dave, I'll let you jump in, but I might have seen the very first janky homemade junior high art project version of the Win by Noon planner. I remember Todd bringing this thing in when it was like cut and paste. He went to a photocopier to shrink stuff down and get it on. It was so homemade that it was beautiful and it was awesome. And this guy was already thinking like this way before anybody called it Win by Noon. Todd was living Win by Noon before there was a brand. So that was really fun for me to reflect on those memories, Todd, because yeah, those were some great days in our career. Thanks for reminding me.
Michael, and you said something that I wanted to just put an explanation mark on, the fact that you and Todd used to be masterminding in person. And I just want to remind everybody on this call, while every Friday at 9:00, we're here to put on a virtual mastermind for the industry, I really want to push everyone on this call. Do you have someone locally in the mortgage business that you are masterminding with regularly? And if the answer is no, then fix it. Let's find someone for you in your local market to network with. feel free to use the Win by Noon Facebook group if you're looking for a local partner to mastermind with. And if you have done it, but you're not doing it enough, guys, like masterminding is such an important part of success in the real world. So thank you for reminding us all of that, Michael.
Dave, yeah, you're spot on with that, and I love that both of these exist because, Deborah and I were just talking about this in the setup. I spend part of my time up here in Lake Oswego, Oregon. I spend part of my time down in Scottsdale, Arizona, and a lot of people ask me, hey, what's the difference between the two? And I remind them right up front, I don't ever compare Lake Oswego and Scottsdale because they're so different. And I want to say the same, Dave, about your comment. I think masterminding here in this virtual setting and masterminding in person are both so valuable because they're so different. You get different experiences when you're doing this, which is really amazing. You guys are bringing in corners of the industry from all around the country. But that local piece is interesting because, Todd, you'll remember when we did this, I think the very first thing we said was, isn't it wild that we both should think we're competing with each other? But the reality is there's such a big world out there. We'll never compete with each other. If we just focus on helping each other, imagine how much separation we could really create. And I think that became true of both of our stories.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And the interesting part about it is we did invite other people every once in a while to join us, and they just didn't stick. They're great people. I still consider them friends and people that I would still, sit down and have a coffee or a beer with. But it's just a different mindset, I think, when you get together consistently with people. And one thing I want to make sure I throw out there is that, we were new at the time. I mean, you look at us now, you fast forward 20 plus years, ultimately, Michael was only a year or two into the business at that time. I was only 3 or 4 years into the business at that time, but we had a thirst and a hunger to grow and to learn from each other. And so, as I kind of say that, let's just kind of, jump in, Michael. I mean, here we are. It's midway through the year. It's the summer season. So where do we want to kick off? How do we want to help the loan officer who maybe feels like, I got more to give this year and hasn't quite gotten there? What are you seeing out there? Let's go.
Yeah, let's lay out a framework because the frameworks are always helpful for me because they provide a sense of, where are we trying to focus? And so I'll lay out 3 things as a framework. Let's talk about mindset, let's talk about skill set, and let's talk about tool set, because I think all 3 play a valuable role in a success formula. And we could certainly find lots and lots of subcategories under each of these. I think because I'm with some of these folks, you 3 included, who are excellent in these 3 areas, I'm going to let you own the expertise on the skill set and the tool set pieces, because I know that's your area of expertise. I want to talk about mindset because so often we come into a year with a lot of optimism. Most of you that are listening, especially if you're in the discipline of these Friday masterminds, you spent time putting together a plan for 2026. You spent time doing the research, doing the review, doing the recasting of those habits that you needed to continue, of the new things you needed to implement, and maybe even of some very creative and innovative experiments that you needed to try. And yet here we are at halftime, and it's time to take a snapshot. Just like an athletic event, we're going to head into the locker room and the game's not over. We've got to go in and re-energize to come out in the second half, but that can't just be emotional. Some of that needs to be driven by some data. I wish I could quote it. Dave, you'll know who probably is known for this quote, but it's a good idea to look at the data every once in a while. And I think that applies here. Here's what I see, Todd. I see what a lot of economists are right now calling a K economy being played out in the housing industry. So if you've studied the K economy and you've looked at it through the lens of macroeconomics, you see this kind of tale of 2 cities. You see certain sectors thriving right now, like at record levels, at levels that nobody even can calculate or understand. And when we hear from those folks, it can sometimes feel very disconnected from the other side of the economy, the side of the economy that is experiencing inflation, that's experiencing downward pressure on whether it's their income potential or their investments, or maybe they're managing debt. So there's this really weird separation in the economy, and I see it alive and well in the housing industry. You talk to enough people and you are going to find some folks that are absolutely thriving in 2026. I mean, record months, record first half of the years, and not just records in net revenues. I mean, in lots of their categories, whether they're KPIs that they're tracking or leading indicators, Todd, as we like to talk about in our planning and prep process. all of the above. And so I hear those stories, and I'm happy to highlight some of the things I've learned and seen, but I also hear the stories of folks who are working really hard, but not experiencing that. They're feeling like, what am I doing wrong? Why can't I kick this into gear like these other folks that I hear about? Why can't I do it? So I'd like to talk a little bit about the K economy, but I've thrown a topic out there. You guys are the hosts of this thing. Do you see the K economy here in the housing industry? And if so, what does that look like to you?
So I am interviewing top producing loan officers every single week. And the person that asked the question, did I do a mortgage coach call this Tuesday? Yeah, we absolutely did. And that particular mortgage professional was up over 50% this time over last year. I talked to Sean Herrero yesterday. He's up 60%. I honestly think the average of the people that I've been interviewing, again, I'm looking for people that are really thriving, winning in big ways. So I'm surfing mountaintops, but the industry is only up 7%. So I want everyone on this call right now, what's your data story? Like where are you at compared to this same time last year? What's your year over year number? If anybody wants to share that in chat, would love to see a couple of people share it. But whether you share it or not, you should know it. You should write it down. And it should impact your mindset. Like when I talked to Sean the other day, because he had a goal of actually 2Xing his business. It's when we first started talking, he was kind of down. Like, I'm like, how are you doing? And he's like, well, I'm doing better than last year, but he was focused on how behind his goal he was. And then I said, Sean, you're up 60% over this time last year. Like, celebrate, brother. And by the way, his mindset, just in the conversation that we're having, got better. It got more abundant in thinking. So yeah, think, gap, and gain.
Deborah, how about you? I mean, you get to, again, talk to a lot of diverse stories. What are you seeing in the K economy of the housing industry?
I will say it's the boring basics. And Todd, you recently posted a walk and talk about this, but it's those who have a plan, they have a standard every day, they are consistent with executing that plan, but they're also watching game film and they're reflecting on their weeks. So they're carving out time and being super intentional, whether it's meeting with their, branch leader or they're part of a mastermind. And there's some accountability there of like looking for small little tweaks, very focused every quarter of not having too many things that they're trying to implement at once so that they can really build out the full strategy and not just like kind of half-assing it a bit on all these different things, which the first quarter of the year, I heard a lot of like this overwhelmment with AI and visibility and people trying to like chase the next shiny object. And then there's another new tool that comes out and it's like, oh, and me included in that. I was like, man, I thought I had just gotten this down and now there's this tool. So just getting back to the basics, focusing on a few big rocks for each quarter, nailing those rocks, giving yourself grace of like, there is no perfect human that I've ever met yet. And just constantly seeking to improve a little bit, 1%, like Todd says, 1% every day, that actually compounds over time.
So glad that was your answer, Deborah, because it's exactly where I'm going to go. So I won't piggyback on it because, Todd, you authored some of these ideas. These are things I learned from you. React to what you just heard.
Well, it's the whole idea of ordinary things done extraordinarily consistent, right? To get results. And I've definitely suffered from overwhelm of trying to do too much at once versus just doing those one or two little things at a time, right? It's the whole saying, right? How do you eat an elephant? It's you eat it one bite at a time. And we're going to talk about the Building Champions experience in a little bit, but the biggest challenge I think that people run into is when it comes to the planning side of things is it's not that we don't know what to do. In fact, I know you who are listening to this and are part of this community, we all do know what is that next action we need to take. We just all struggle to slow down enough to take the time to implement that one thing like Deborah's talking about. We have that FOMO of the other tools. So we don't finish the one thing we started before we jump on to the next.
All right, so there's a lot to talk about there. I'm going to highlight just a simple version of this that even if you don't see us because you're listening, you'll understand because you can visualize this. Imagine I have two gears, and imagine these two gears are designed to work together. So, they dovetail, and so one gear is driving the other. When I get hired to coach most folks that are high performance, whether they're in a leadership role or a production role, They tend to be high performance folks, and they are coming to me for this, what I'm going to call outer gear. Here's what's in the outer gear. They want help with, better decisions, better relationships, better results. These are things in the outer gear, right? Help me grow, help me accomplish more, help me to have more intention and purpose, and all of these things. All wonderful. I love working with folks on those areas of the outer gear that they care about. But the truth is, what you just described, Todd, is they already know what to do. And Deborah, you said it too. They're trying to avoid being drawn away by complexity when simplicity always wins. So what I end up finding is we end up spending more time on their inner gear, where things live, like their beliefs, their thoughts, their emotions, their feelings, things that aren't typically the things people want to talk about. In fact, when you start, entering into a coaching conversation around some of those topics, you'll meet a little resistance, like, hey, I came here to, improve my systems or improve my process or yeah, I understand that. But if you already know that that's what you need to do and you're not doing it, let's really get into the why behind the why. Let's understand what's going on that's maybe causing you that resistance when we're not here on this active coaching call and you're really engaged and everything seems really good. And then 30 minutes later, you're being swamped by your reality, getting pulled away, getting distracted, and experiencing what Daniel likes to call the drift. I'm here to fight against that drift. And I really try to convince people that if we're going to work together, let's spend time talking about those things that really cause you to feel confused, concerned, maybe even afraid from time to time. Because if we can tackle the root of those things, guess what tends to happen? All those things that they know to do, the disciplines. I mean, Todd, you've authored a journal they can follow. It's a beautiful playbook. The problem is the problem isn't that they don't have the tools. The problem isn't even that they don't have the skills. I mean, Dave, look what you designed. 20 years ago, we were talking about a total cost analysis, and it's just as valuable today as it was when I first met you. It's not a lack of tools. We've got to believe that we can change and grow and learn new things. Dave, when we were together at the Housing Wire gathering, what was that, 2 months ago back in Texas? One of the things that was so exciting for me leaving there was this is the third year in a row where AI took as a theme, but instead of it being this nebulous, what is it going to be? I think we're way past that. We're living in it now. And now we're starting to see the excitement that maybe AI isn't coming to replace us after all. Maybe it's actually coming to help us be more efficient and effective, which means maybe I can start changing what I believe about it, where the resistance is, and actually start experiencing some of the lift of implementing it. That's just one small example of the opportunity I see when I'm doing a halftime review. I want to figure out, where is that resistance? If it's in AI, let's talk about it. If it's in your belief that you can't sell in this economy with these rates, then let's figure out what's going on behind that. Because last I checked, we're all living in the same economy, and yet some of us are experiencing some amazing ROI, others of us aren't. So let's not use the excuse of things we can't control. Let's find out what we can control, and often that's in our noggin.
Yeah, no, you're so right. You mentioned mortgage coach, and actually the reality is it's changed a tremendous amount. I mean, when I founded Mortgage Coach, it printed out a piece of paper. Like, that was the deliverable to the consumer 100% of the time. It was, well, and then we evolved to where you could print it into a PDF and you could send the PDF. And then a link became a thing, and it became a, internet link. And then we added video to it. And by the way, here's where I'm going to start going with this. Not everybody adds a video to Mortgage Coach, but the loan officers that do are richly rewarded by using those features. Another thing that is recently new is now it's got AI built into it. So questions like, what is APR? Your consumers can ask those questions, but I want to put it this way for everyone. I want you just to think of the tools that you have right now that you're not using in a best practice way. Because to me, that's one of the biggest challenges, is that loan officers are sitting on massive opportunities, but they're still not using their CRM the way it's intended to. They're sitting on all the capabilities, all the superpowers in the world, but they're just not training themselves to adopt it, and they're not adopting new habits. Any thoughts on that?
Well, you're describing mindset right there, because you're exactly You're pointing the fact these things are available. The evolution of these products is amazing. And for those that do have curiosity and are willing to lean in and experiment and try, they're experiencing that kind of multiplier lift from it. The ones that don't, you have to ask yourself, what keeps you from learning something new? What keeps you from trying something that clearly is producing results? Now look, I want to be careful as I say that. My goal is not to spread us too thin, because if I were really to dig deep into the reality, like if we did a forensics on, okay, well, what's happening in that lower leg of the K economy? Todd, I reference you a lot, and this is not to kiss your tail because we're here on your recording. I reference you a lot because back in, and you'll tell me the exact year, I think it was around 2015, you stood up in front of a sales mastery event when they interviewed you talking about your first $100 million year. And it was kind of a, what were the secrets to your success? And you killed it by coming up and saying, I think I'm going to really disappoint you when you hear how absolutely boring my story is going to sound. And you started telling us all about the fundamentals of execution, day in, day out, week in, week out. I reference this often because I think that might be one of the things we need to revisit in that lower leg of the K is, why does simplicity and consistency win? Why does that 1% improvement actually create the results that really matter over time? We need to follow the lead of someone like you who's laid that out, who's clearly done it. It's not a question of, does this work? It's, why are you afraid to try it? And so if you're out there listening to what we're talking about today, I think this is going to be my first takeaway. If you're in that lower K, you're just not experiencing this and you're wondering why, consider at halftime reviewing all of these things you have. Maybe they are the actual tools that you have. Maybe it's some of the relationships you have. Maybe it's some of the choices you've made along the way to justify how you spend your time, and consider doing some pruning. Pruning would be my first takeaway from this one, because it may be that less is more. And when we look at the success of those that are really experiencing the lift, that story gets repeated over and over again. There's a relentless pursuit of essentialism in that group of people. They just don't get drawn away by bright, shiny objects. Why is that? Well, I think they're they're not like superhuman people. They're just regularly pruning. So here's how pruning works. And I won't ramble on this too long, but I want you to hear this so that you understand it's not a tough concept. I learned this from Dr. Henry Cloud back in Necessary Endings 15 years ago. He looks at pruning like we look at gardening. If you go into the, and by the way, I'm not a gardener. So for those of you listening that know gardening, you're going to immediately be like, Regan, you don't know what you're talking about. First, we go into a plant and we look for dead branches, and we remove those first. It creates some space so we can see what's going on. So as you're doing a mid-year or a halftime evaluation, Deborah, I loved you called it, you got to review the game film. Love that phrase. If in the game film, you're starting to see dead branches, and I'm just going to call these out. It might be some of the products you're selling. It might be some of the partners you're working with. It might be some of the process that you've embraced. It's just dead on arrival. Cut it out. Number two, look for the branches that are dying. They're not dead yet, but you're smart enough, just like a gardener is smart enough to see that branch isn't going to make it through the next season. We're in what I call the classic summer season between Memorial Day and Labor Day. This is a perfect time to identify those dying branches. And by removing those branches, you now have a lot of space in the plant to see the third type. And this is going to be the tough one for all of you. Anyone who knows horticulture knows what a sucker branch is. It's that version of the plant that coils itself around the rest of the plant. And at a glance, it looks really healthy. There's a lot of leaves, lots of flowers. It looks great. When you look closely, you realize it's taking such a disproportionate of energy away from the rest of the plant in order to survive, which means it's capping that plant's capacity. And that's going to be the tough one for you to figure out in your pruning, is what looks healthy from your business review that's actually limiting your capacity to do the 2x, 10x model. You can't 10x if you can't identify the sucker branches in your business. If you're successful at removing some sucker branches, that fourth branch, it's the beautiful branch. It's the one that you want to be Mr. Miyagi with. You want to be so careful with your pruning that all you're doing is making tiny little adjustments that create that wonderful 10x result. Pruning is a practice that I just don't see often enough. Everybody stacks, everybody adds. I get it, but I'm the guy to tell you stop and evaluate it and run a KISS filter. If you can't see that it's worth keeping or improving, then it's going to be either starting or stopping. That's it. Don't give yourself any other options. And if you can't see the ROI from any of the areas of your business at this halftime review, consider some pruning. That'll create so much creative space for you to multiply those really healthy branches.
Yeah, that's huge. My quote of you that I quote all the time is complexity is the enemy of profitability. And so when I think of that, I think of Essentialism, which is a great book. I think you're the one who gave it to me. And if you haven't read it, get it. And, I think it's an opportunity. And I think it really just starts off with what you just said. That whole keep, improve, start, stop is a great model for pruning. Those of you who are Win by Noon users, you may actually recognize it because it's built into the monthly and quarterly reviews. It's just one of those things that I believe is foundational. And so I think that your horticulture example was perfect.
Did I do okay with that one?
You actually did a really good job. I recently put a new garden in and have been boning up on all my planting skills, and that sucker branch is true in gardening, and it's even more true in life and business. And it actually got me thinking, like, as you were talking, I could think of a few things that I should consider pruning. Thank you for that, Michael. And by the way, everyone on this call right now, if you are listening to this, start writing down ideas, take notes, and don't just take notes of what you learn. Like, what should you think about pruning? If you're listening to the recording of this, put this on pause, take some notes. That whole KISS process is just, there's no better framework. I don't know how old it is, but it works today. I am infinitely positive it's going to be just as valuable 100 years from now as it is today. So love that you reminded us of all that, Michael.
Yeah, those are just examples of simplicity, and I want to practice what I talk about. So, Todd, that's hilarious that you hold on to that quote. It's embedded in who I am. I'm not even sure where I first came up with that idea or who I borrowed it from. It's just who. In fact, it's funny you mentioned essentialism. My buddy David Roberts got mad at me when I referred the book to him. I'm like, I don't get it. This seems like something you'd love. He said, because you should have written this book. This is the way you've been living your whole life, and you let somebody else beat you to the punch. Fair enough. But I'm also, I walk on feet of clay. I don't need to be the author of all the great ideas. I just need to help other people. I'm just another blind mouse trying to show the other blind mice where the cheese is.
Okay, so Michael, I have a question on the sucker plant. Do you have any examples, since that one's harder to identify? Are there common themes or patterns from even just the leaders that you coach that?
Great. Yeah, great clarification, because that's probably a fair one, because it is definitely the one in coaching I'm going to spend the most time on. Because you're right. Most people, if it's a dead branch, we don't have to talk about it a lot. If it's a dying branch, I might have to convince them, like, quit lying to yourself. It's dying. But the sucker branch is tough because it's there. So let's put it into the context of a couple things our audience can definitely relate to. It could be you're working with a referral partnership. Maybe you've even formalized that in some sort of, marketing agreement or even a joint venture partnership. And as you analyze the activities that are going into the results, you realize that those activities that may be leading to eking out some profit are taking away major hours of your day to do them. And yet somewhere else in your evaluation, you recognize, I've got these other folks that I work with a lot less time I spend, and I end up netting about the same thing. Now, this is a really hard one because, we're all emotionally attached to our relationships. I need data to help me identify that sucker branch, Deborah, because if you tell me, well, hey, we need to rethink this partnership we have, we need to rethink this relationship, that feels threatening to me, to someone I love working with. And often I'm like any of the other salespeople out there. I'll lie to myself. If you ask me who your favorite referral partners are, I'll tell you the people I love working with. But the data helps me avoid lying to myself. The data helps me see that, oh, okay, got it. I get 10 leads a month from this particular group. 2 of them decide to apply with me, and one of them closes 6 months later after a knife fight with the other lender that they referred to. that's a sucker branch.
Got it. I think the biggest challenge there is the data.
It is. And so let's talk about some of the fundamentals of that upper leg of the K, and maybe we'll see where that data fits, because you're spot on with this. If someone were to say, okay, well then what are some of those simplicity components of those that are experiencing success right now? I see 4 things at a macro level. Again, all these you can drill down into, so happy to do it if you guys want to. But the first thing I see in all of them is they all have a really clear vision. They know who they are, they know what they want, they know why they want it, they know how to get after it, and they've got deadlines around when it's going to happen. Now, that may have sounded like the 5 components of journalism, but let's call it what it is. I mean, they are on it. That's their vision. Second is they then take that vision and chunk it down into a real plan. They process it into some level of executables that are bent around either due dates or repeated activities, disciplines. So they create a plan, and they are not shy about making commitments to that plan. Fun fact, everybody likes to talk about accountability in coaching. Accountability doesn't really work unless you've got a commitment first. And the plan is where the commitment begins. So we've got to have a plan. Third is they develop a process or a playbook. Language sometimes is a little bit different for everybody, but they have they don't wing it. They're not out there, going one week to another, like, well, this week I'm trying this, next week I'll try that, and the third week maybe I'll scrap it all and go. No, they've defined a playbook or a process that's consistent. And then fourth, and this is where the data comes in, they track everything that matters. If you don't track it, you can't review it. As a business owner, Todd, you and I both operated businesses before we came into the housing industry. And I, again, here I talk about a journalism background. I didn't really know what a P&L was until I had to learn what it was, because it mattered. Well, guess what? Once you learn that I lie, you lie, but the numbers don't lie, you start to get excited about what the numbers really do tell you, because they tell you the real story of whether or not these great ideas are working or not. And so that fourth component can't happen without tracking. So maybe I'm just biased because you and I've been doing this a long time, Todd, but that's one of the things I love about Win by Noon is it eliminates the tracking excuse. It allows me to be disciplined with what I said I would do, keep track of it, so that you're right, Deborah, when I want to go into halftime and review the game film, that's a key piece of it. Now I can identify where those sucker branches are. Now I can make tough decisions. Now listen, it sounds simple when you say it like that. Reality is everybody's got resistance. Everybody's got, well, that's how you do it. That's not how I do it. You're wired differently than me. I give people a lot of latitude for their uniqueness. I love uniqueness. But at the end of the day, we're talking about fundamentals here. If we're talking about losing weight, if at some point I'm eating more calories than I'm burning, we could talk about how unique you are and how different we are, but I don't think the math is going to work. At some point, I've got to create a calorie deficit if I want to lose weight. And if you want to grow your business, you got to take pruning seriously, and you got to be able to eliminate those sucker branches, and you can't do it if you don't know the data.
And it's like, you're so right when it comes back to the fundamentals, but also don't discount just because it's mid-year. Like, you could still come back. Like, you could have your own 29-point comeback story if you believe.
Okay, so great segue. Can we go back to mindset?
Yes.
Because
yes.
if we're, picture we're in this locker room, and we've all been in athletics, so we can literally picture what this looks like. And hopefully, if you're out there listening, I don't care if you were in little league or high school sports, or you get to play college sports, just picture that locker room. You're coming into halftime, and let's create a scenario, because it's not fair to say everybody gets to come into the same locker room. We're going into the locker room of the team that's had their ass handed to them in the first half. Okay. This is the locker room we're walking into.
That was most teams I was on.
That was not most teams I was on.
I'll let you two work that out in the margin. This is just a scenario. So we're here in the locker room, and it's been hard. It's not that we didn't come into the game with a plan. It's not that we didn't try to execute our plan, but the other team was just as prepared to fight against us, and their plan is winning. We might call that in this, scenario, like what we feel like with the economy. Like, we came into this year with a business plan. We came in with a commitment to execute on these certain things, but we just didn't feel like the wind was in our sails. It was against us the whole way. Well, here's a news flash for you as we enter the locker room. A poor sailor blames the wind. A good sailor adjusts her sails. So the first thing we're going to do is change that mindset in the locker room. We've got to get to that belief. So, Deborah, I'm glad that's where you went, because without the belief that the second half matters and we can still win, well, folks, I'm sorry, this game's already over then. Then just call in a forfeit, I guess is what I didn't know the word because I don't know how to say it. That's not in my nature, but I think that's what it's called. Like, just call in a forfeit. Come on, folks. Don't quit. This is not the time to quit. You fought for the last 4 years to get to a season like this. And when you see some folks thriving, then it's possible. That means it's possible. So let's just figure out how to change what you believe. And maybe we do need to change your strategy slightly. Maybe we do need to go through that exercise of pruning. But if at the core of this, you don't believe that that's possible, then yeah, Deborah, your example of that NBA final proves those guys in New York believed. They never stopped believing.
Is there a way to track beliefs? Because I think that's a hard thing to measure. And if you go back to what you measure, you can then manage and improve. How do you spot check your blind spots or your thoughts and your beliefs?
Todd would be the first guy to point this out. I was never I was never the producer that anybody was going to say, "Oh my gosh, set the marks for that guy." I was always a mid-tier producer, and often the question within my group was, why? Like, you're capable of so much more. I had a lot of other things that I really cared about, to where my business was built to be a component of my bigger vision, not the only thing in my vision. But for other folks, this is the only thing they care about. For other folks, they're maybe carrying a bag of bricks. Maybe they've got, they're a medical thing they're dealing with, or a parent or a child that they're managing. You just never know. Coaching is interesting in that respect, because you're right. There's no easy way to say, well, let's just look at the data on that. I've got to dig into the story on that. And I have to have enough empathy to care about them. I might end up being the only person who genuinely cares about them, because I'm not attached to either the emotional or the financial outcomes, which gives me a chance to really be neutral. Fun fact, I operate in confidentiality. These are closed doors. I don't, but it was impossible during COVID, when everybody was back at the house, for my kids not to kind of get a sense of, oh, this is what you do for a living. Like, I didn't know what this really looked like, but you're kind of like a therapist. You're kind of like a priest. You're kind of like I was just being me, but they're overhearing half of a conversation and thinking, I guess I thought coaching was different than this. And I think the reason they realize that is rooted in what you're saying is, yeah, the hard work is not identifying the numbers and calling out the black and white of it. The hard part is getting into somebody's head and helping them understand the why behind that resistance. And frankly, that may be the hardest thing I have to do, but I care enough about people that I'm willing to do it.
Yeah, I just love that. So a couple things I want to throw in here, kind of a quick plug for a couple of things. Number one is, if you're on the live call, we'll also put this into the show notes, is that Arnie threw in there a link to the Win Now podcast that Deborah and I did, where we really laid out the 6 steps for productivity. That's kind of what Michael mentioned a few minutes back with regards to what I said on stage about how I grew my business 45% in a flat year by just committing to the boring things that you have to do. Number 2 is, I think a lot of you are like, oh, now I see why Todd really likes Michael. And if you want to get just a dose more of Michael on a regular basis, he and a good friend, Catherine Peterson, do a podcast called Building Bigger Lives. It's available on all the podcast platforms, and you can join in as they interview other folks within this industry and others, and really bring a different insight, I think, each week, that I think you'll all find great. And then I think the last thing is, and I'm going to have you speak to a little bit of, for the people who at home, I think that the struggle now is how do I carve out the time to prune? And so I know, Michael, you and I are both going to be at the Building Champions Experience in September, which is just an event I'm so glad that Building Champions brought back, because it's not it's not an event like we're going to in Vegas, where you sit there and people talk at you all day. It's an event where we actually have someone explain to us the processes that you're talking about, and then we actually go out there and work on them, have coaches come over and help sharpen us, get in small groups and sharpen each other. And then once we get that piece of framework done, then we go work on the next part of our system, what Building Champions would call the core 4. So I would love, number one, for you just to kind of give your overview of the Building Champions experience. We'll throw the link to it. It's buildingchampions.com/BCE for Building Champions Experience. And if you would just talk a little bit about what that event is, and then let's bring it back to the people who are listening to this, and then how can they, in their day-to-day busy life they're in right now, pull out to do this pruning exercise you're talking about.
If we look back in time, Todd, I'm more interested in the why rather than the what of the BCE. And here's the reason I want to share that. There's a story that goes with this. You know, we all that have enough of this gray hair in the housing industry remember vividly how we felt in the fourth quarter of 2007, how we felt throughout the year in 2008, and then again how we felt in 2009. By the third quarter of 2009, I was convinced we weren't going to die, but I was not convinced that I knew what the future looked like. I'm not afraid to admit this. In 2007, I'm not sure that I knew what an FHA loan was. I mean, I'd heard of them, but I didn't know if I knew how to originate one. In 2009, I think Peter and I had to put 100 of them on the books just to be able to pay our own mortgages. And, you know, so we had to learn who a whole new audience of customers were back in 2009. And I developed some real passion for first-time home buyers at that time. So this is the frame of the window of this story. I got invited, and Todd, I feel like I give you credit for this. So even if I'm wrong, just take the credit. I got invited to go to Oregon for the first time to a place called Sun River. Never heard of it, but kind of like the sound of it. Sounded nice. And the purpose of this event was exactly what you described. It was a retreat designed to help us think deeply about our plans personally and professionally, and to be able to get an opportunity in that time frame to reset and recast before we made this shift. And a lot of things were going on for me at that time, but one of them involved this amigo that just popped up on the screen down here who showed up in a canoe with me. And I met a guy named Dave Savage. We floated down the river with a guy named Mats, who, rest in peace. That was a great canoe to be stuck in with Dave and Mats. We spent hours, Dave. I don't know, 90 minutes, 2 hours. I don't know how long we were out there.
I know it was so long that Daniel had to jump on a stand-up board and
come find us
and go upstream for, I mean, a long way, and say, hey guys, the thing is over. Everybody's waiting for you.
Yeah.
And so we had such an amazing experience together that like literally we closed the place down.
That's such a great
Why
way
does that not surprise me?
No, it was magical. I mean, it was truly one of the most important life planning experiences, no pun intended, of my life. And I've been to the Building Champions experience 3 times.
Yeah.
And I'm seriously considering going again to this one. And like, I wouldn't be who I am as a leader. I wouldn't be who I am as a parent, as a husband. And from a self-care perspective, I mean, a lot of the disciplines I learned around life planning, they happened at the event. And then
Loan officers, it's halftime 2026, and guess what? You may or may not be on track. Michael Regan, the coach at Building Champions, is going to talk about the K economy, how it applies to loan officers. That's to you. How some of you are crushing it, having your best years ever, and others of you are not. You're down there struggling. And so this is your opportunity to learn Michael's framework, which includes pruning, like how to figure out what are the things you got to get rid of, what are the things that you got to pour more little love into, and where you should be focusing your time. The bottom line is this. He says it's probably not your strategy, it's your execution. This is the roadmap to get there. Join me and my friend Michael Regan, along with Deborah Byrd and Dave Savage, on this edition of the Loan Officer Mastermind. Loan officers, it's halftime 2026, and guess what? You may or may not be on track. Michael Regan, the coach at Building Champions, is going to talk about the K economy, how it applies to loan officers. That's to you. How some of you are crushing it, having your best years ever, and others of you are not. You're down there struggling. And so this is your opportunity to learn Michael's framework, which includes pruning, like how to figure out what are the things you got to get rid of, what are the things that you got to pour more little love into, and where you should be focusing your time. The bottom line is this. He says it's probably not your strategy, it's your execution. This is the roadmap to get there. Join me and my friend Michael Regan, along with Deborah Byrd and Dave Savage, on this edition of the Loan Officer Mastermind.
People that we met, you and I are still good friends. And anyways, just magical. And by the way, the sombrero, for who's wondering, I'm in Sister, Oregon, which is about 30 minutes from Bend and about an hour from Sun River. I'm actually going fly fishing after this. And I just stopped at the fly fishing shop because I didn't have a hat. And I'm like, I need a hat or I'm going to get just scorched on the river today.
Todd, this is my favorite guest episode ever. I mean, you can't beat this.
Yeah.
Life as a redhead, right?
Yeah, all
Yeah.
good.
And by the way, this is not a sombrero. This is a fly fishing hat. So,
All right,
let's get it straight
I'm
there,
surprised
Deb.
you
those
didn't
of
know
you
that.
listening to the podcast, yes, you're missing out on a treat. So, yeah, I mean, I think, Michael, it's hard to explain what the experience is, but there's some famous poet who says something like a change of place, a change of pace, a change of perspective that Daniel always quotes. And we're talking about Daniel Harkavy, the CEO and founder, no longer CEO, the founder of Building Champions. And it really is just a magical opportunity. So for me, once I knew it was back, the reason that I signed up and said, hell yeah, was because, and let me tell you, it's at one of the busier times in my year, but I just know it's an opportunity to push me back because as much as I'm really good at peeling back and spending time every week, really every day, I review what I did the day before and look at my intentionality for the day ahead. I look at it every week. I do it every month. I do it every quarter. It's still not the same as actually moving myself on an airplane and getting alongside of other people doing the same thing that I'm doing and having just that magical opportunity to experience going through what I've already been through and coached dozens, if not hundreds of people through myself.
Yeah, so let's lay out the framework for it, because if we've at least garnered any interest in checking this thing out, I mean, you can see all the details on the website.
Hey,
But
Michael, what
yeah,
might be a cool way for you to do that is almost a prep to go there. Like give everyone, if they were going to go to this life planning experience. And by the way, the venue of where it is magical. Venue matters. The people that are in that room matters. Like it's just some of the most humble, grateful life planning folks. But even if you either one couldn't afford or you didn't go, give them the prep. Like what do they need to do to prep for an event like this or prep for life planning?
okay, so let's maybe complete the counterbalance to the life plan with the other pieces that are there, and that may help answer the prep, because some of you are hearing this term life plan and you know exactly what Dave's describing. Others of you are thinking that sounds nebulous. Are we tree hugging? Like what's going to go on in Central Oregon? And the fact of the matter is that when I look out into the future with any client, I'm looking for that point in the future that is so compelling to them that they're willing to work their tails off to get toward it. Well, in order to define that point, we sometimes need resources. We need help. So what we're going to give you at Building Champions Experience, and this may help you prepare, is we need, well, let's use a GPS as an analogy for this. You need a destination. And in order to do that, most of you now understand when we hold GPS in our pockets in a mobile phone, but really what they're doing is they're going out to satellites and they're positioning an axis and a radius on the earth to a very specific point, and then they're calculating routes. And you're going to get a fast route, you're going to get a short route, you might even get a scenic route, but that's the choices that you're going to get based on that point. Well, life planning is like one of those, the axis, and the other is going to be your business plan, which is going to be that radius. So the axis and radius tell us where in the future that business vision that you have and the plan you create from it is intersecting with your life plan, which are all the other areas of your life that include your career, include your health, include your personal finances, include your personal relationships, and many other things that matter to you. And we're going to give you the space to revisit the clarity you have today over where those intersect. The point is, our lives are regularly progressing at a pace that most of us just can't believe anymore. I mean, we're just living in hyperspace most of the time. And this is going to be a chance for you to slow your roll enough to reorient around, am I still aiming at a future that really matters to me? And I need some tools and I need some time to work through where that axis and that radius is currently set. It may be that as you do this, you find out you're not on the course you thought you were. You hadn't picked the short route or the fast route or the scenic route. You chose some other route. Well, if that's you, go back to this GPS analogy. Last I checked, if I'm plugging in an address and it tells me how to get there and I decide all on my own to take a left turn, my GPS doesn't dysfunction. It just recalculates. It tells me how to get back on track. And that's my hope for BCE. If that's you considering coming, is maybe you just need to get back on track. If that's you, this is an opportunity to think deeply about those things that matter most. So the preparation, Dave, is really coming in with the open mind of, this is the time I've carved out to think deeply about my personal and professional future, to reorient toward where I'm heading and make some new commitments to get back on track. By the way, if you're one of those few people who find out I'm actually still on track, the other benefit you get, which both Dave and Todd referenced, is you're going to be there in a room with a couple hundred other really dynamic professionals who are in that same mindset. So talk about, the power of being around positive people. These folks are all trying to do the same thing, and they come from different industries, which means you're going to be challenged to think differently than you might think if everybody you always talk to is in your same industry. This is going to push you to think about ideas you hadn't implemented, or even things you hadn't tried. You don't have to implement them all. You don't have to try them all. But if even one thing caused you to come back and do something radically different than anybody else that you were competing with, well, then mission accomplished. You're already working toward your unique value proposition, and hopefully you're back on track with where you're heading. So yeah, I think the preparation, Dave, is all in, erase the slate, give yourself permission to come in with a clean mindset and come in with the desire to leave reoriented and fired up for your future.
Love that. Thank you, my friend.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, because you then, not only are you spending the time, there are people from all these different industries. And I do know there's a lot of rock star friends of mine in the mortgage space going. I know Coach Bill Hart's going to be there. It's going to be fun to hang out with him. We do have him scheduled to come on next month here onto the Loan Officer Mastermind. So you'll see him here on a Friday. It's the opportunity then when you get stuck that you've got a coach there to help you, right? So you don't have a full-time coach necessarily, because maybe it's not in, your current budget or your current plan, but you've got really some amazing people there to help. So love that. Deborah gives given us the reminder in the chat that we got to get back to the pruning part. So we've got 7 minutes left to close this out with style. Michael, how would you close it out to get people who can take the idea of the frameworks and everything you've talked about now and put it into action?
All right. So the first thing I'm going to do, and those of you who are on video can see that I'm going to point over to the good old fashioned wall calendar. You've got to find time right now before you get off of this mastermind group. You've got to find time in your calendar to carve out a few hours for this halftime review to exist. Without the space defined to do it, the law of intentions will defeat you. You're just not going to, you're going to have a good idea, but you're not going to get it done. So go right now and block out that time in your calendar. I'm of the same kind of discipline that Todd is. I have quarterly business reviews already scheduled into my calendar at the beginning of every year. Shocker, guys. I know that the quarter ends every year on, the end of March, the end of June. These aren't like mysteries to the experience. So I just go ahead and block them out, because I know I'm going to get to those seasons and I'm going to need some time to review. And so if you've got time blocked out, then the next thing you're going to need is you're going to need your tools. You're going to need those data points. So go collect your business plan, go collect all your data reports from your CRM or your LOS. In fact, both, if they're still separate. If they're woven together, even better. And go take any other data points that you're using in your tracking. So if you're using a Win by Noon journal or any other tool to keep track of what you're doing, because with those tools in hand, you can now do the third thing, which is genuinely evaluate. Dave said the simplest framework still works. He's exactly right. That KISS framework is all you'll need to do. So if you're ready to do some pruning, you're going to need to look at what you will keep doing, because the data provides evidence that it's working. If you're going to improve, you're going to figure out what it would take in order to take something that's working, but maybe not optimized. If you're going to start something new, you're going to be able to use data to support the justification for why you're going to take it on. And in order to create the space, you're going to stop something that clearly isn't working. Here's my advice with that. Not everything that you stop means take it out back and shoot it dead. Maybe you just need to press pause. Just put it on the shelf. I got a bookshelf back here. Just stick it on a shelf and say, I can come back to that at a later time when maybe that idea is better suited for the execution. But right now, it's just eating up my bandwidth or my resources. That KISS filter will be the guide for this time that you spend. So put the time in your calendar, gather all the tools that you need, run that KISS filter, and then, it bears, without, stating the obvious, Get back out on the field for the second half with a mindset that you still have time on the clock to win. Her goal was 200 million this year. She's still somewhere in the 50s at halftime. Now, some of you are out there hearing that thinking, my gosh, that'd be awesome to do 50 in a year. I'm not comparing the numbers. We're just comparing the delta. This gal was feeling defeated at halftime. I had to point out to her all the areas that she was, in fact, winning, but still remind her the results aren't in yet. So get out there and harvest those results in the second half, because all those disciplines that you have worked on are paying dividends. I'm kind of like a corner man when somebody's fighting. They're out there in the ring for 3 minutes and it's a slugfest. I'm there to remind them, don't get distracted by that. Don't get drawn away by that. Don't take that sucker punch. Stay with your plan. It's working, and watch the dividends come in. Look, if your plan's not working, let's make some adjustments. But for most of you, we heard it loud and clear today. It's probably not your strategy, it's your execution. So let's just get back to those fundamentals. Deborah, that's what I think about pruning. I think it has to happen in a process like this, because if it doesn't, you could go out there hacking away with some shears and you could make some big mistakes. So do it methodically so that you're like a surgeon and you carve those things out intentionally.
Nailed it. That was perfect. We
All
could
right,
end the
Deborah.
show right there, Todd.
I feel like that's it. All right, Deborah, give us your close.
My close is rewatch this and send it to someone else that you care about and hold each other accountable. And for those of you who may need to where maybe you're doing great, and maybe focus on the gain and not just the gap. Like, remember, you are worthy. You have earned it. You deserve it. You're just as capable as everybody else, and you're worth it. So that's my close, Todd.
All right, Dave.
Yeah, so I don't have a lot on this call because it's just been amazing. And I thought Michael just nailed it. Be sure to schedule that 2-hour period that he talked about, put an alarm on it, and you haven't failed until you turn off the snooze of that alarm. Like get that session done. This coming Tuesday, I'm going to be interviewing Sosi Avela. So yes, every Tuesday at 9, I am still interviewing amazing mortgage professionals for the Coach's Corner. And I love this Friday call. I mean, I always get value from it. And wish me luck on the river, getting ready to go fly fishing. And back to you, Todd.
Well, Dave, I'm glad you were able to carve out some time away from the fish to hang out with us. And Michael, I think this call was exceeded my expectations. I always knew we were going to have a blast together. I always enjoy any time we get to do this. It's been too long, and I miss those Fridays at the Fork and the Spoon, or whatever it was called, that we got to hang out. And what I want to remind everyone of, because I think Christian made a good point, that this carving out this time is really tough for those of us with ADHD. But the bottom line is you have to set yourself up for success. It starts with what Michael said. You got to put it in the calendar, right? Then you have to use the script. I have a commitment at that time, because things are going to come up that you're going to want to put into place of that time that you scheduled to plan, because you're like, oh, I can just plan next week, but you won't. And so you've got to protect that time like it's the most important time, like it's the first date with your spouse that you really want to make sure that happens. And then set yourself up for success. Give yourself the time in a place where you can actually then bounce around and do the things that you have to do with regards to, get up and walk around, and, get up real quick and do a lap around the block if you have to. But whatever it is, then to bring yourself back and make sure you complete that. I think Deborah's words were correct. You've got to re-listen to this. I truly took the most notes I've taken all year on an interview, and I just want to say thank you all for listening. Michael, thank you so much for carving out time to be here, because it's always a challenge to get you on, because you're so well planned. And if you're not listening to the Building Bigger Lives podcast, please do follow Michael out on social. We'll have all those links down below, and look forward to seeing you next week here on the Loan Officer Mastermind. Thanks, everyone.